Picture a zebra standing at a waterhole in South Africa. A speaker hidden nearby plays a recording of a lion growling, and the zebra tenses, alert, watching the tree line. A little while later, a different recording plays, just an ordinary human voice, someone talking casually at normal conversation volume. The zebra doesn't just tense up this time, it runs, faster and sooner than it did for the lion. That's not a hypothetical, that's a real study, and it points at something genuinely unsettling. To a huge amount of wildlife, an ordinary human voice reads as more dangerous than an actual apex predator standing right in front of them. It's tempting to write that off as some kind of glitch, an overblown modern reaction to guns and vehicles and everything else that's changed about the world in the last few centuries. But the evidence points somewhere much older and much stranger than that. This fear looks less like a new overreaction and more like an old, accurate memory, one written into animal behavior by an extremely long track record. Researchers named Liana Zanette and Michael Clinchy ran exactly this experiment at a massive scale across South Africa's Greater Kruger National Park. They played recordings of human voices, lion vocalizations, barking dogs, and gunshots to 19 different mammal species, everything from elephants and zebras to leopards, hyenas, and giraffes. Across the board, the animals were about twice as likely to flee from the human voices compared to the lion sounds, and they abandoned waterholes roughly 40% faster when they heard people talking than when they heard actual lions. Species that lions genuinely hunt and kill, animals with every biological reason to fear a lion specifically, still treated an ordinary human conversation as the bigger threat. This wasn't people shouting or gunfire or anything obviously aggressive, just talking, the kind of sound you'd make walking down a street. The researchers even controlled for language, using recordings in 4 different local languages: Tsonga, Northern Sotho, English, and Afrikaans. And the fear response held steady, regardless of which language the animals heard. Whatever these animals were reacting to, it wasn't a specific accent or a specific set of words. It was something about the sound of a human voice itself, recognized as dangerous across an enormous range of species that have never shared a language with each other, let alone with the recordings playing from a hidden speaker. Here's the part that makes this reaction look less like an overreaction and more like an accurate read of the actual danger. A researcher named Darimont led a global survey comparing how humans hunt compared to every other predator on the planet, and the numbers are stark. Humans kill adult prey at rates up to 14 times higher than natural predators do. And it's not just the sheer scale that's different. Natural predators, wolves, lions, big predatory fish, overwhelmingly target the young, the old, and the sick, the individuals easiest to catch and least critical to a population's future. Humans do close to the opposite. Human hunting and fishing disproportionately targets large, healthy, reproductive age adults, exactly the individuals a population depends on most to keep reproducing. A predator that specifically removes the breeding age adults from a population is doing something ecologically unprecedented, something no other predator on Earth does at anywhere near the same scale. Darimont's data covered thousands of populations across land and ocean alike, from terrestrial mammals to commercially fished species, and the pattern held with striking consistency across almost all of them. Wherever humans were involved, the largest, healthiest, most reproductively valuable animals were the ones disappearing fastest. Zanette and Clinchy's animals, in other words, aren't panicking over nothing. Their fear response is tracking something real and measurable, arguably more accurately than most humans track it themselves. So how did humans end up capable of hunting like that in the first place, when they're slower than a lion, weaker than a bear, and completely lack claws or fangs? Part of the answer goes back roughly 2 million years to a specific set of physical changes identified by researchers Dennis Bramble and Daniel Lieberman. Studying the skeleton of the genus Homo, they cataloged around 26 separate traits, including a long, springy Achilles tendon, a special ligament running down the back of the neck to keep the head stable while running, and a body built for shedding heat efficiently, all pointing toward one specific capability: endurance running. Not sprinting, which almost any four-legged animal wins easily, but distance. The ability to keep moving for hours. in the heat of the day, long after a faster animal would need to stop. That capability lines up with something called persistence hunting, a method still practiced today by a handful of hunter-gatherer groups, including trackers in the Kalahari Desert, who have been filmed and studied doing exactly this. Instead of trying to outrun an antelope in a sprint, which is a contest humans lose badly, a persistence hunter simply keeps pace with it for hour after hour under the hot midday sun, deliberately choosing the hottest part of the day rather than avoiding it, never letting the animal fully rest or cool down between bursts of running. Most four-legged prey animals can outsprint a human easily over a short distance, but can't dump body heat while running nearly as efficiently as a human can, thanks to that same dense covering of sweat glands and mostly bare skin covered back in the episode about why ancient humans might have smelled the way they did. An animal built for a fast sprint and a long recovery keeps having to slow down and pant in the shade. The human hunter simply never stops moving. Eventually, after miles of this, the animal collapses from heat exhaustion, unable to run another step, and the hunter simply walks up to something that minutes earlier could have easily outrun a car. No claws needed, no fangs needed, just patience, heat tolerance, and the willingness to keep moving longer than anything else on the savanna is prepared for. It's also worth pausing on how strange this whole picture really is, from a purely physical standpoint. Take away every tool, every weapon, every piece of clothing, and stand a human next to a lion. On paper, the lion wins every single physical category that matters to a predator: speed, bite force, claws, raw strength. And yet wildlife across an entire continent, tested experimentally, rather than just observed anecdotally, consistently rates the unarmed, physically unimpressive human as the greater threat. That gap between what a human's body can obviously do and what a human is actually capable of achieving as a predator is exactly what all three pieces of research below are trying to explain. Put these three pieces together, and the zebra bolting from a human voice stops looking irrational. About 2 million years of persistence hunting capability built into the skeleton itself. A killing pattern confirmed by a global dataset that hits prey populations harder and more precisely than any natural predator manages, and a fear response measured directly in 19 separate species that ranks that specific threat above an actual lion. 3 completely different kinds of evidence coming from 3 completely different fields: ecology, wildlife behavior, and human anatomy, landing on the exact same conclusion somewhere along the way, without claws, without fangs, and without any of the traditional predator toolkit. Humans became the single most effective and most universally feared predator most of the animal kingdom has ever encountered. That reputation, once earned, doesn't need to be re-earned by every single generation of animals to persist. A species doesn't have to personally witness a human hunt to inherit caution around the sound of a human voice. That caution, once it proves useful enough, often enough, becomes a durable, heritable part of how a species reacts to the world, passed down the same way any other successful survival instinct would be. Which means the zebra at that South African waterhole almost certainly has never personally been chased by a human on foot for miles under the midday sun. It doesn't need to have been. Something in its species' long collective experience with humans already worked out the correct answer to that particular question correctly and passed it down as pure instinct. Run from that voice, and run now, before finding out the hard way whether this particular human happens to be hunting today.